One trader, one secret account, one bank that had survived wars, financial crashes, and more than 230 years of history. In February 1995, Britain's oldest investment bank collapsed almost overnight. The losses weren't caused by a global recession or a market crash. They were caused by one employee sitting thousands of miles away in Singapore. By the time executives discovered the truth, $1.4 billion had disappeared, the bank was bankrupt, and the trader responsible had vanished. His name was Nick Leeson, and this is the unbelievable true story of how one man destroyed Britain's oldest bank. Barings Bank wasn't just another financial institution. Founded in 1762, it had financed governments, funded major international projects, and even handled banking for the British royal family. For more than 2 centuries, Barings survived revolutions, wars, economic crises, and political upheavals. It had built a reputation as one of the safest and most respected banks in the world. No one imagined that its greatest threat wouldn't come from outside the company. It would come from a 28-year-old trader working in an office nearly 7,000 miles away. Nick Leeson didn't come from wealth or privilege. Born in Watford, England, he wasn't a financial genius with an Ivy League education. He started his career performing back-office administrative work, settling trades, and handling paperwork. Ironically, this experience would later become his greatest advantage. Unlike most traders who only understood buying and selling, Leeson understood how the bank's internal systems worked. He knew how transactions were recorded, how audits were performed, and where weaknesses existed. Those lessons would eventually allow him to hide one of the largest financial disasters in history. In 1992, Barings sent Leeson to Singapore to help expand its derivatives trading business. It was a huge opportunity. Singapore's financial markets were booming, and Barings wanted to establish itself as a major player in Asia. Leeson quickly impressed his superiors. He appeared hard-working, confident, and remarkably successful. Profits from his trading desk grew rapidly, earning praise from executives back in London. Within a short time, he became one of the bank's brightest rising stars. His bonuses increased, his reputation grew. Few people questioned how he was generating such extraordinary returns. What Barings failed to notice was a dangerous flaw in its own organization. Normally, the people responsible for making trades are kept completely separate from the people responsible for recording and verifying those trades. It's one of the most basic rules in banking because it prevents fraud. But in Singapore, Nick Leeson was placed in charge of both operations. He controlled the front office where trades were executed, and the back office where those trades were verified. It was the financial equivalent of allowing the same person to write checks, approve them, and audit the accounts. The system relied almost entirely on trust. At first, everything seemed to be working perfectly. Leeson specialized in futures contracts tied to Japan's Nikkei 225 stock index. His job was supposed to involve low-risk arbitrage, profiting from tiny price differences between markets. These trades generated small but reliable returns, but success created pressure. Executives expected higher profits every year, and Leeson wanted to prove he was their star performer. Instead of sticking to low-risk strategies, he began making increasingly aggressive bets on the direction of the Japanese stock market. Some trades paid off handsomely, encouraging him to take even bigger risks. Then one day, everything changed. The losses started small. Like many traders, Leeson believed he could recover them with one good trade. Instead of reporting the mistake to his managers, he hid it. To keep the losses out of sight, he used an obscure account called Oh. Officially, it was supposed to correct minor accounting errors. In reality, it became a secret dumping ground for millions of dollars in losing trades. Every time Leeson lost money, he quietly transferred the losses into account 8888, while reporting only his winning trades to London. Senior executives believed he was making enormous profits. The truth was exactly the opposite. As months passed, the hidden losses grew larger. $10 million became $50 million. 50 million became 100 million. Instead of admitting defeat, Leeson doubled down. In his mind, one successful trade would erase everything. It's a dangerous mindset known as doubling down, where gamblers and traders risk even more money trying to recover previous losses. Sometimes it works, most of the time it ends in disaster. Leeson convinced himself that the market would eventually move in his favor. Each morning he walked into the office acting like one of Barings' greatest traders, while secretly carrying losses that would have terrified the bank's executives. Back in London, nobody suspected anything was wrong. The reports arriving from Singapore showed spectacular profits. Executives celebrated Leeson's performance and rewarded him with larger trading limits. Ironically, the better the fake numbers looked, the more freedom they gave him. Auditors visited Singapore but failed to uncover the truth. They trusted the documents placed in front of them. Because Leeson controlled both trading and settlement, he could manipulate records before anyone reviewed them. The very controls designed to protect the bank had become meaningless. Then came January 17, 1995. At 5:46 in the morning, a massive earthquake struck Kobe, Japan. More than 6,000 people lost their lives, thousands of buildings collapsed, and one of Japan's most important economic regions was devastated. Financial markets reacted immediately. The Nikkei 225 plunged as investors feared the economic consequences of the disaster. For most traders, it was another difficult day in the market. For Nick Leeson, it was a nightmare. He had placed enormous bets that the Japanese stock market would remain stable or rise. Instead, the earthquake sent prices crashing in the opposite direction. Overnight, his hidden losses exploded. Hundreds of millions of dollars disappeared. Faced with catastrophe, Leeson made the decision that would destroy Barings Bank forever. Rather than closing his positions and accepting defeat, he borrowed even more money from the bank and placed even larger bets that the market would recover. It wasn't investing anymore. It was desperation. Every movement of the market now determined the fate of a 233-year-old bank. When prices moved against him, the losses multiplied. Instead of recovering, the Nikkei continued falling. Leeson's secret account became a black hole swallowing money at an unbelievable rate. Hundreds of millions became nearly $1 billion. Yet London still believed their Singapore office was generating profits. No one realized that one trader had effectively bet the future of the entire bank on a single market recovering. By February 1995, the situation had become impossible to hide. Margin calls flooded into Barings demanding enormous sums of money to support Leeson's positions. Executives wired hundreds of millions of dollars to Singapore, believing the funds were supporting profitable trades. In reality, they were simply delaying the inevitable. Every transfer bought Leeson another day while making the final collapse even worse. The bank was unknowingly pouring money into a financial sinkhole that could never be filled. On the evening of February 23rd, Nick Leeson finally accepted that the game was over. He left a simple handwritten note reading, "I'm sorry." Then he quietly boarded a plane and fled Singapore with his wife. He didn't tell anyone where he was going. By the time Barings executives realized he had disappeared, panic spread through the organization. Investigators rushed to examine his accounts. What they discovered was beyond belief. The losses weren't millions, they weren't even hundreds of millions. They totaled approximately $827 million, equivalent to about 1.4 billion Bosch at the time, more money than Barings Bank itself was worth. The news stunned the financial world. How could a single trader destroy one of Britain's oldest and most respected banks? For more than 2 centuries, Barings had financed governments, survived the Napoleonic Wars, lived through the Great Depression, and endured 2 world wars. Yet it had been brought to its knees by one employee operating from a trading floor in Singapore. Within hours, emergency meetings were held in London. Executives desperately searched for a way to save the bank, but the numbers simply didn't add up. Barings didn't have enough capital to absorb a loss of that size. It was insolvent. Regulators and central bankers immediately became involved. The Bank of England worked around the clock, hoping another financial institution would rescue Barings before global markets opened. Several banks examined the books, but as soon as they saw the scale of the hidden losses, they walked away. No one wanted to inherit a financial disaster worth more than the bank itself. After exhausting every option, Barings officially collapsed. On February 26, 1995, ING, a Dutch financial group, agreed to purchase the entire 233-year-old bank for the symbolic price of just £1. A bank once considered one of the most prestigious in the world had been sold for less than the price of a cup of coffee. While Barings disappeared into history, Nick Leeson was on the run. His journey took him through Malaysia, Thailand, and eventually Germany, where international authorities tracked him down. At Frankfurt Airport, he was arrested before he could continue his escape. News cameras captured images of the man whose secret trades had shaken the global financial system. He was extradited to Singapore, where prosecutors charged him with fraud and deception related to the concealed trading losses. During the investigation, a question kept surfacing. How had no one noticed? The answer was uncomfortable. Barings hadn't failed because of one dishonest trader alone. It had failed because of a culture that rewarded profits without asking enough questions. Executives were dazzled by extraordinary returns and became less interested in understanding how those returns were being generated. Basic controls were ignored, warning signs were overlooked, internal audits failed to uncover obvious problems. Responsibility had been concentrated in the hands of one person, violating one of the oldest principles of financial risk management. Never allow the same individual to control both execution and oversight. The infamous account 888 became a symbol of corporate failure. For years, it quietly accumulated losses while everyone celebrated fictional profits. Had anyone performed a truly independent review of that account, the disaster might have been stopped long before it reached hundreds of millions of dollars. Instead, every success reported by Leeson encouraged the bank to trust him even more. The fraud fed on its own reputation. The more profitable he appeared, the less scrutiny he received. In Singapore, Nick Leeson pleaded guilty to charges of deceiving auditors and cheating the Singapore International Monetary Exchange. In 1995, he was sentenced to 6.5 years in prison. While serving his sentence, he was diagnosed with colon cancer. After receiving treatment, he eventually recovered and was released early in 1999 for good behavior. Unlike many financial criminals who disappear from public view, Leeson later chose to speak openly about what happened. He wrote books, gave interviews, and lectured businesses about risk management, ethics, and the psychological pressures that can lead people to make disastrous decisions. His story became a case study taught in universities, business schools, and financial institutions around the world. The collapse of Barings fundamentally changed the banking industry. Regulators strengthened oversight of derivatives trading. Financial institutions tightened internal controls and introduced stricter separation between front office traders and back office operations. Risk management departments gained greater authority to challenge successful traders instead of simply celebrating their profits. Banks invested heavily in systems designed to detect unusual trading activity before it could threaten the entire institution. The lessons learned from Barings continue to influence financial regulation decades later. Perhaps the most frightening part of the story is that Nick Leeson never intended to destroy Barings Bank. According to his own account, his original goal was simply to hide a relatively small mistake until he could recover the money. But every failed attempt to fix the problem only made it larger. Pride turned into secrecy. Secrecy turned into deception. Deception turned into catastrophe. It's a reminder that some of history's greatest disasters don't begin with evil intentions. They begin with one bad decision, followed by another and another. until the truth becomes too terrifying to admit. Today, the story of Nick Leeson is studied far beyond the world of finance. Psychologists examine it as an example of how pressure and overconfidence can cloud judgment. Business schools teach it as one of the greatest failures of corporate governance ever recorded. Risk managers use it to train new employees on the importance of independent oversight, and investors see it as proof that even the most respected institutions can collapse if basic controls are ignored. The technology has changed dramatically since 1995, but the human weaknesses behind the disaster remain exactly the same. The collapse also inspired books, documentaries, and the 1999 film Rogue Trader, based on Leeson's own autobiography. For many people, it was the first time they realized that financial markets could be just as dramatic as any Hollywood thriller. There were no explosions, no armed robbers, and no dramatic car chases. Instead, there were spreadsheets, trading terminals, hidden accounts, and decisions made in seconds that erased billions of dollars. It showed the world that some of the most dangerous battles take place inside offices, where fortunes can disappear with a single click. Looking back, the warning signs were everywhere. Leeson insisted on controlling both trading and settlement. His reported profits were unusually consistent in an industry known for volatility. Massive amounts of money were repeatedly transferred to support his positions without sufficient questioning. Auditors accepted explanations they should have challenged. Executives focused on results instead of understanding the risks behind them. None of these problems alone destroyed Barings. Together, they created the perfect conditions for disaster. The collapse of Barings carries an important lesson that extends far beyond banking. Success should never replace accountability. Whenever one individual becomes too trusted to be questioned, organizations become vulnerable. Strong systems aren't built on trust alone. They're built on verification, transparency, and independent oversight. The greatest financial disasters often occur not because people are incapable of stopping them, but because they assume someone else is already paying attention. More than 30 years later, Barings Bank exists only in history books. The institution that had survived revolutions, wars, economic depressions, and political crises was ultimately defeated by poor risk management and one trader's refusal to admit he had made a mistake. Nick Leeson's name has become permanently linked to one of the greatest corporate failures of all time. His story is a powerful reminder that financial empires don't always collapse because of external enemies. Sometimes they collapse because the danger is already sitting inside the building. If you enjoyed this documentary and want more true stories about billion-dollar losses, Wall Street scandals, rogue traders, corporate fraud, financial collapses, and extraordinary events that changed history, make sure you subscribe to Kake's Dark Ledger and turn on notifications. Every week, we uncover the biggest financial secrets the world has ever seen. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next documentary. Subscribe!